Amsterdam, 1656. An official entered this house with Rembrandt van Rijn. For 2 days they moved from room to room, recording what they found: furniture, paintings, studio equipment, household objects, and the extraordinary collection Rembrandt had assembled over the years. The reason for this careful inventory was not artistic. Rembrandt could no longer pay his debts. Yet the document produced during one of the darkest periods of his life would preserve something remarkable: a detailed record of the world in which he lived and worked. To understand what Rembrandt was about to lose, we have to go back 17 years, to 1639, when he bought this house. Amsterdam was flourishing, and Rembrandt van Rijn was already one of the city's most successful and sought-after artists. On this map of old Amsterdam, the position of Rembrandt's house is marked here. It was here, in 1639, that Rembrandt bought a substantial house for 13,000 guilders, an enormous sum, which he was to pay in installments. The city around it has changed enormously, but the house survives. The house itself dated from 1606. Behind its relatively narrow Amsterdam facade was far more than a family home. It was Rembrandt's workplace and studio, a place to receive clients and sell art, a school for his pupils, and the home of the extraordinary collection he assembled around himself. For nearly 2 decades, these rooms contained almost every part of his life: business and family, teaching and collecting, experiment and artistic creation. But the prosperity suggested by this house would not last. It is that inventory, together with surviving records, drawings, and later research, that allows us to recover something of the world Rembrandt created here. To understand the world that was later broken up and sold, we have to look at how this house has been carefully reconstructed from the inventory made in 1656, just before everything was auctioned off. Almost nothing that filled these rooms in Rembrandt's time still stands here. The paintings, objects, and curiosities you see are not the ones Rembrandt owned. They are period pieces and works by artists from his circle, placed here to help us visualize the collection that was recorded and then sold. The house was not simply Rembrandt's home and studio. It was also a place of business. In this elegant anteroom, he received clients and conducted his trade in art. The Rembrandt house deliberately mixes Rembrandt's own prints with paintings by his teacher Peter Lastman, by pupils such as Ferdinand Bol, and by other artists from his wider circle, to evoke the artistic environment of the house when he lived and worked here. Here in the anteroom, the museum has placed works that stand in for the collection lost in the bankruptcy. Among them are these. Biblical episode, 2 Kings 5 verses 15 to 17, in which the Syrian commander Naaman, cured of leprosy by the prophet Elisha, offers rich gifts, visible in the camels, chariot, baggage, and vessels. Elisha refuses them. The woman at the window and the doorway composition derive from Rembrandt's etching of Abraham casting out Hagar and Ishmael. Painting by Peter Lastman, The Crucifixion, 1616. Lastman, Rembrandt's teacher, depicts the crucifixion at Golgotha. Painted by Jacob Simonson Pines, The Meeting of Jacob and Esau, circa 1610 to 1620. The scene is Genesis 33. Jacob, returning after years away, meets his brother Esau, who approaches with an army of 400 men. Esau embraces Jacob, the younger man kneels or is drawn into the embrace. Jacob's family and the gifts, flocks, appear nearby. Esau's armed retinue with banners fills the right side of the landscape. This is a classic pre-Rembrandtist treatment of the reconciliation theme. Painting by Peter Lastman, Paul and Barnabas in Lystra, 1617. After Paul heals a crippled man, the people of Lystra mistake the apostles for the gods Jupiter and Mercury and prepare a sacrifice, the white bull adorned with garlands, the priest, torches, classical temple architecture, and altar. Paul tears his clothes in protest while Barnabas reacts with dismay. The painting is a dramatic narrative piece typical of Lastman's multi-figure history paintings that shaped Rembrandt's early style. This is a panoramic Dutch river landscape of the type closely associated with Philips Koninck, also written Philips de Koninck, 1619 to 1688. Koning was a contemporary of Rembrandt and part of his broader Amsterdam circle. He specialized in these wide, high-horizon views with expansive skies, rivers winding through the flat countryside, small figures, and distant villages. The signature visible in the lower right is consistent with his works. Gerard Dow, Standing Man Leaning on a Stick 1631. Gerard Dow, 1613 to 1675, was Rembrandt's first pupil. He worked in Rembrandt's Leiden studio from about 1628 to 1631 or 1632, exactly around the date of this painting. The work is a characteristic early Trony-style figure study, a full-length standing man in dark clothing and a broad-brimmed hat, holding a walking stick/cane, set against a plain dark background. Images of many more paintings available. Details are at the end of the video. Behind the anteroom was another part of Rembrandt's business, and another part of his art. Rembrandt was not only a painter. He was one of the most innovative printmakers of his generation. The inventory made in 1656 records an oak press in this room, probably the press on which he printed his etchings. The image was worked into a copper plate, and then inked and pressed onto damp paper. Here on the press bed sits a plate ready for printing. The silvery surface is a modern demonstration plate. The museum uses these for practical reasons during live demonstrations. Fresh impressions were then hung up to dry. The salon, a living room, bedroom, and picture gallery. Beyond the more public parts of the house was the salon, Rembrandt's living room and bedroom. Paintings covered the high walls, while the fireplace and heavy wooden furniture gave the room the character of a prosperous 17th-century home. Like many people in 17th-century Holland, Rembrandt slept in an enclosed box bed. A few lines on paper preserve an intimate moment inside the house. And here, remarkably close to all of this, was the bed. One of Rembrandt's drawings brings this room much closer to us. He sketched his wife Saskia lying in bed. The large studio was the heart of Rembrandt's working life. Here we see a box bed built into the wall, a reminder that living and working spaces often overlapped in this house. Nearby stands a cast-iron stove that would have heated the room during the cold Amsterdam winters, essential both for comfort and for the proper working of oil paint. A simple leather armchair completes the picture of a practical, furnished studio where Rembrandt painted, taught his pupils, and spent much of his day. The room faced north, giving him the steady, even daylight painters valued for their work. Around him were the materials of the painter's workshop, canvases, tools, plaster casts, costumes and objects that could become part of a painting. In the room below, Rembrandt printed his etchings. Upstairs, in the largest room in the house, he painted. Painting began long before the first brushstroke. Pigments had to be prepared, paint made, and canvases made ready. In the museum today, live demonstrations still show how this was done, the same tools, the same process that took place in Rembrandt's workshop. Only then did those materials arrive here, at the easel. Away from the studios and the rooms where Rembrandt conducted his business was the kitchen, the center of everyday household life. According to the museum, this was the most comfortable room in the house. The fire was kept burning for much of the time, providing warmth as well as the heat needed for cooking. Meals were prepared here, and this was also where the household ate. The shelves, pans, dishes, and jugs recreate something of the working kitchen of a prosperous 17th-century Amsterdam home. The household maid also slept here, in a box bed. A door beside the draining board opened onto the courtyard, while another small doorway beside the fireplace led towards the Zwanenburgwal. The courtyard has also yielded direct evidence of everyday life in Rembrandt's household. During restoration work, a cesspit was discovered here and excavated in 1997. Among the objects dating from the period of Rembrandt's ownership were pottery vessels, a pewter spoon, a wooden butter scoop, a lace bobbin, clay pipes, and other household objects. More unusually, 2 earthenware pots contain traces of materials used by artists, lead white in one, and chalk and glue in another. Rembrandt was not interested only in paintings. He surrounded himself with objects, works of art, weapons, shells, fossils, books, costumes, and curiosities from the natural and human worlds. Together they formed a private collection that offered an extraordinary store of shapes, textures, and ideas for an artist. To enter this room is to see something of the world that fascinated him, antiquity and nature, the familiar and the exotic, all gathered together within reach of the artist's eye. This part introduced Rembrandt turning his own face into a subject, not only a likeness, but a way of studying expression, identity, reputation, and the possibilities of print and paint. Few artists examined their own appearance as persistently as Rembrandt. Throughout his career, he returned again and again to his own face, sometimes formally, sometimes experimentally, and sometimes with remarkable informality. In his etched self-portraits we see him trying expressions, poses, costumes and different ways of using light and shadow. They were more than records of his appearance. His own face became one of the subjects through which he explored character, emotion, and the possibilities of printmaking. In this self-portrait of 1639, leaning casually on a stone ledge, Rembrandt presents himself not simply as a craftsman, but as a competent and successful artist. Alongside its permanent displays, the Rembrandt House also hosts temporary exhibitions devoted to other artists. At the time of this visit, the museum was presenting Metamorphosen, an exhibition of drawings by the Dutch artist Peter Voss, inspired particularly by Ovid's Metamorphoses and the transformation of people into birds. The Rembrandt House is more than a reconstruction of the artist's home and studio. It is also a working museum, with demonstrations, changing displays, and temporary exhibitions that place Rembrandt and his art in a wider artistic context. At the time of this visit, one of these temporary exhibitions was Metamorphosen, devoted to the Dutch artist Peter Voss. Highlights of the Rembrandt House Etchings collection. In previous centuries, Rembrandt's fame derived primarily from his graphic works. His etchings were eagerly sought after by collectors even during his lifetime. Rembrandt was one of the greatest graphic talents of all time. His contemporaries admired the freedom of his drawing, his dramatic light effects, and his bold experiments with etching techniques. Throughout the centuries, his graphic art has been a source of inspiration for other artists, from Goya to Picasso. Generations of artists have borrowed themes and compositions from Rembrandt's prints. Rembrandt's spontaneous drawing style is perfectly expressed in his etchings. The movements of his hand can be traced as clearly in this medium as in his drawings. By varying the printing process, he tried to make every impression an individual work of art. The Rembrandt House Museum has one of the most important collections of Rembrandt prints in the world. Rembrandt produced around 290 prints in all. The selection of highlights shown here is arranged according to the different subjects that Rembrandt portrayed. The Raising of Lazarus. When Jesus heard of the death of Lazarus, the brother of Mary and Martha, he traveled to Bethany, where he resurrected the dead man. By that time Lazarus had already been buried 4 days. This is Rembrandt's first monumental etching. Christ appeared to his disciples after his death. It was not until he had shown them his wounds that they were willing to believe that he had risen from the dead. The Great Jewish Bride. Modern opinion is that this is the biblical figure Esther. She is preparing to visit King Ahasuerus in order to appeal for the lives of the Jews living in Persia. The features of Rembrandt's wife Saskia can be recognized in the woman's face. The Little Jewish Bride, Saskia as Saint Catherine 1638. In this woman's face the features of Rembrandt's wife Saskia can be recognized. The spiked wheel that stands on the right behind her identifies her as the martyr Saint Catherine of Alexandria. In the 18th century this etching was known as the Little Jewish Bride. Anslo, 1592–1646, was a cloth merchant in Amsterdam and at the same time preacher to the community of Waterlanders in Amsterdam. The Waterlanders were Mennonites, followers of the Frisian Anabaptist Menno-Simons. The portrait was indented onto the etching plate from a drawn study. De Jong was a well-known publisher of prints and maps in Amsterdam. He gained possession of a large number of Rembrandt's etching plates. In 1679, 2 years after his death, an inventory of his estate was drawn up. The list includes 74 of Rembrandt's etching plates. Leven van Koppenal was head of the so-called French school in Amsterdam. In 1650 he fell prey to an attack of insanity, after which he was no longer allowed to teach. He then turned to working as a professional calligrapher. Jan Asselijn, circa 1615–52, was a well-known landscape painter. In the first state of the print a painting on an easel stands behind him. In the second state Rembrandt erased this completely with a scraper. The preacher Johannes Wytenbogert, 1597–1644, was one of the leaders of the Remonstrants. It was a caption, a panegyric in Latin by Hugo Grotius. The individual works we have seen are only a small selection. Rembrandt produced around 290 prints during his lifetime, and the Rembrandt House today holds one of the most important collections of his etchings in the world. Their subjects range widely: portraits and self-portraits, biblical stories, landscapes, figures from everyday life, and studies in which Rembrandt experimented continually with line, shadow and light. In the museum, many of these works are displayed together in groups. Seen like this, their relatively small scale becomes part of their character. They were made to be viewed closely, inviting the eye into remarkably intricate scenes built from little more than ink and lines on paper. What is shown here gives only an impression of the extent of the collection. A much larger selection of the works photographed during this visit can be explored through the links provided at the end of the film. What we see today is not Rembrandt's house preserved exactly as he left it. His possessions were dispersed after his bankruptcy, and the contents of the rooms have long since disappeared. But the surviving house, the detailed inventories and years of research have allowed the museum to reconstruct something remarkable, not simply a collection of objects, but the environment in which Rembrandt lived, worked, taught, and created. Today, the Rembrandt House is both a reconstruction of that 17th-century world and a living museum, preserving his graphic work while continuing to explore the artists and ideas connected with his legacy.